A 6-year-old girl stood trembling on the porch, her tiny suitcase slipping from her grasp. Her stepfather's voice thundered through the hallway, sharp and merciless. "You're not my child. You're nothing but a burden." With a violent shove, he sent her tumbling down the steps. The suitcase burst open, spilling her small clothes across the yard. Her favorite dress was stained with dirt, and her little brown face was streaked with tears. On her knees, she sobbed desperately, begging not to be cast out. But no one came to her aid. Neighbors only whispered behind fences, unwilling to interfere. And then, when it seemed she was truly alone, a tall black man in a cream-colored suit stepped forward. His hand reached out to her, and with steady, unshaken words, he said something that silenced everyone watching. "From now on, you're coming with me." The heavy wooden door had barely stopped echoing when David Carter slumped back in his leather chair. His green and yellow striped shirt was wrinkled, his glass of liquor half finished, and his eyes bloodshot from endless nights of drinking. Since the funeral of his wife, Emily's mother, the house had been stripped of warmth. 6-year-old Emily Carter, her curls damp from tears, clutched the handle of her worn suitcase as though it were her last anchor. Just months ago, she had been lulled to sleep by her mother's gentle songs. She had once been carried on her stepfather's shoulders, giggling in the park, listening to bedtime stories. But grief had twisted everything. David was no longer the man she remembered. "You are not my child," he bellowed again, his voice rattling the living room walls. "I told you to get out." Emily's hands shook as she tried to retreat up the stairs, but a sudden push sent her tumbling forward. Her suitcase burst open, spilling clothes across the tile floor. A small teddy bear, her late mother's last birthday gift, rolled away, its fur dusty and frayed. Vanessa Blake, 30 years old, stood nearby. She was her mother's cousin but had shown no kindness since the funeral. Her red dress clung tight to her frame, her blonde curls glowing under the light. To anyone outside, she played the part of a concerned woman, murmuring softly, "David, stop. You've had too much to drink." But when her gaze flicked toward Emily, her lips curled into a fleeting, mocking smile before quickly reshaping into false pity. Emily saw it all. Outside, behind the fence, a few neighbors peeked in. They shook their heads, whispered, but stayed hidden. No one dared to step onto the Carter porch. Not for a little girl being pushed into the cold. Emily stumbled forward, snatching her teddy bear and clutching it against her chest. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered almost to herself, "Daddy, you promised you would never leave me." But David's face only grew darker. He staggered toward her, fingers stabbing the air. "Stop pretending. You're no daughter of mine. Go." Emily fell to her knees, her voice quivering but strong. "I'll be good. I won't make noise. I can sleep on the sofa if you want. Just please don't send me outside. Please don't make me go." David snarled. "Your mother is gone. I won't carry her burden anymore." "I'm not a burden." Emily shook her head wildly, gripping her bear so tightly her knuckles turned pale. "I can cook porridge like Mama taught me. I'll study hard. I'll be quiet. Please don't drink anymore. It scares me." "Shut up," David roared. His voice cracked with rage. "You're just like your mother, always dragging me back to a past that's dead." Emily's sobs deepened. "But the past is our family. You carried me to the park. You laughed with me. Don't you remember?" Vanessa leaned in, whispering smooth words that sliced like blades. David let her go. "She'll learn to walk away on her own." Emily pressed her palms together, blood from her scraped knees smearing the tile. "Daddy, please. You're all I have left." But David's heart had hardened. He shoved her suitcase toward the door, spilling what remained of her tiny belongings across the porch. "Don't make me say it again. Get out." It was then that firm footsteps echoed at the gate. A tall black man in a cream-colored suit appeared, carrying a black leather briefcase. His face was stern, but his dark eyes carried something fierce yet tender, a compassion that cut through the cold night air. His name was Jonathan Reed, 35 years old. A brilliant attorney and self-made millionaire, he had built his reputation in New York's toughest courts. He was admired for his wealth, but what mattered more was his heart. Jonathan had grown up in foster care, abandoned like Emily now, and had vowed that no child would suffer the way he once had. He had promised Emily's late mother, Sarah, his childhood friend, that he would always check on her daughter. Tonight that promise had brought him here. The scene froze him. A little girl kneeling on the steps, clothes scattered, teddy bear tossed aside, her stepfather swaying with a drink in hand, and a woman at his side wearing a triumphant smile. Jonathan didn't hesitate. He walked straight to Emily, bent down, picked up the teddy bear, and brushed it off with his sleeve before placing it gently into her arms. His voice was steady, calm, yet sharp enough to slice through the air. "David, is this how you treat a child?" David stiffened. His jaw clenched, but he growled, "Jonathan, you have no right to interfere. This is my house, my family. Get out." Jonathan's gaze locked onto him, unwavering. "Family doesn't mean throwing a little girl into the street. That child is the daughter of the woman who gave you her whole heart." Emily's small hands tightened around the teddy bear. She looked up at Jonathan, her eyes brimming with tears, but inside, for the first time since her mother's death, a faint light flickered. Jonathan extended his hand toward her. His words came slowly, each one a vow. "From now on, you're coming with me." Emily hesitated, glancing once more at David, hoping for the father she once knew to stop her from leaving. But he turned away, shame written across his face. Vanessa's lips curved into a quiet, victorious smile. With trembling fingers, Emily reached for Jonathan's hand. The moment her small hand touched his, the heavy door behind her slammed shut, cutting off the last echo of her old life. Jonathan bent down, gathering her spilled belongings and tucking them back into the suitcase. He dusted off the bear again and placed it firmly in her arms. Without another word, he helped her to her feet. "Let's go, sweetheart," he whispered. He led her to his black Bentley parked outside. He opened the door, fastened her seatbelt, and adjusted the seat for her small frame. Emily hugged the teddy bear close, her eyes red, her face hidden against its worn fabric. Jonathan started the engine, the heater humming softly. Across the street, Mrs. Linda Green, the elderly neighbor, peeked from her window. She opened it just enough to call out with a trembling voice, "That little girl didn't do anything wrong." Jonathan looked up and gave her a nod of gratitude. He would remember her face. Witnesses mattered, and truth always needed light. As the Bentley pulled away from the curb, Emily sat silent, clutching her bear. Jonathan glanced at her in the mirror. His voice softened. "I'm Jonathan," he said gently. "And you're Emily, right? Your mama talked about you often." Her voice was a faint whisper. "My name is Emily." Jonathan smiled faintly, sorrow tugging at his heart. "Your mama was the best friend I ever had. I promise you, you won't be alone anymore." Emily shifted slightly, her eyes still lowered. "Mama told me about Uncle Jonathan. She said, you were the only one who always helped her." Jonathan drew a deep breath. She was right. "And now I'll help you too. From this moment forward, you're safe." For the first time, Emily allowed herself to lean back in the seat. The faintest hint of hope stirred in her chest. The long road ahead would be filled with battles, secrets, and scars. But tonight, for the first time in weeks, she was not completely alone. The road stretched out under the glow of street lamps, the hum of the Bentley's engine filling the silence. Emily sat in the back seat, her little body pressed tightly against the door, as though afraid she might be thrown out again at any moment. The teddy bear, worn and faded, was hugged so firmly against her chest that her fingers left tiny indents in its fur. Jonathan glanced at her through the mirror. He saw a small child, no more than 6 years old, sitting as still as stone, her face streaked with dried tears. He adjusted the heat inside the car, then reached into the console and pulled out a small bottle of water. Turning slightly, he held it out. "Here," he said softly. "Take a sip. You must be thirsty." Emily hesitated, then took the bottle with both hands, careful not to spill even a drop. She sipped slowly as if one mistake would cost her everything. When she finished, she handed it back with downcast eyes, whispering, "Thank you." Jonathan placed the bottle aside and kept his voice calm, steady, reassuring. "You don't need to thank me, sweetheart. Tonight you're safe." Emily's lips trembled. She didn't reply, but her small shoulders relaxed just a little. Jonathan kept one hand steady on the wheel, his other resting lightly against the gear. He spoke gently, not wanting to startle her. When I was about your age, I had to leave my home too. I grew up in a foster house. Some nights, I felt like nobody in the world even knew I existed. Emily slowly turned her head, her swollen eyes peeking up at him in the mirror. But then, Jonathan continued, your mama, Sarah, she was my friend. She'd come by with cookies, old books, sometimes coats that actually fit. She remembered my name. She cared when nobody else did. Emily's lip quivered. She whispered so faintly he almost didn't hear, Mama used to say you were the only one who never turned away. Jonathan swallowed hard, steadying his breath. That's right. And I promised her that if anything ever happened, I'd look out for you. That's why I'm here, Emily. I'm not going to let you go through this alone. For the first time that night, Emily's gaze lingered on him. There was still fear in her eyes, but behind it, a faint spark of trust flickered. The city lights grew brighter as they approached Manhattan. Tall buildings loomed against the sky, windows glowing like scattered stars. Jonathan pulled into the underground garage of his building, nodding at the doorman, Mr. Harris, who stepped forward to assist. Good evening, Mr. Reed, the doorman greeted, his tone polite but his eyes softening when they fell on Emily. He saw the little girl clutching her teddy bear and suitcase, her face worn with exhaustion. Without a word, he lifted the suitcase and carried it inside. Emily clung to Jonathan's hand, her grip tight as they stepped into the elevator. She stared at the floor numbers lighting up one by one. Jonathan leaned down. Your mama once told me, if Emily ever finds herself lost, tell her she can trust me. Do you believe her, Emily? Her eyes flickered, uncertain but hopeful. She gave the smallest nod. When the elevator doors opened, the warm scent of chicken soup drifted through the hallway. Miss Parker, the middle-aged housekeeper, stood waiting at the door of Jonathan's penthouse. She smiled kindly at Emily, saying nothing that would overwhelm her. Instead, she simply stepped aside. I warmed the soup, she told Jonathan. There's bread and warm milk. Thank you, Jonathan replied. That will be perfect. Inside, the dining room lights were soft, not harsh. Jonathan pulled out a chair for Emily, placing a bowl of steaming soup and a glass of milk in front of her. She sat down but did not lift the spoon. Instead, she smoothed the hem of her teddy bear's dress, staring at the table. Jonathan sat across from her, not rushing. He set his own spoon aside and spoke slowly. When I was your age, Emily, the other kids at the foster home used to laugh at my old shoes, my worn-out clothes. People said I wouldn't become anything. But your mama believed in me. She gave me hope when nobody else did. Emily looked up slightly, her small eyes glistening. Jonathan continued, his voice low. She showed me how to get into the library, helped me pay for a school test I couldn't afford. She gave me a coat that actually fit my size. And most of all, she reminded me I wasn't invisible. That's the only reason I'm standing here today. At those words, Emily's face crumpled. She dropped her spoon and burst into tears, loud, aching sobs that filled the room. 4 days she had held them back, hiding in silence, but now they broke free. Jonathan didn't rush to hush her. He simply slid a box of tissues across the table and let her cry. When her sobs softened into hiccups, he spoke gently. It's all right to cry, Emily. Tears don't make you weak. They mean you've been holding on too tight for too long. Emily wiped her face, her small hands trembling. In a broken whisper, she confessed, I just want Daddy to hug me again. Like before Mama died. He used to take me to the park, buy me ice cream. Now he won't even look at me. Jonathan's chest tightened. He slid a glass of milk closer to her. You deserve to be loved, Emily. Don't ever believe otherwise. No one can take away the memories you had with your mama. And the future is still waiting for you. Emily took small sips of milk, then slowly picked up her spoon and began to eat. Not out of hunger, but because for the first time in weeks she didn't feel completely abandoned. After dinner, Jonathan returned with a small box. Inside was a scratched metal keychain shaped like a star. He placed it on the table. When I left the orphanage, this was all I had. Your mama gave it to me. She said, When you're afraid, hold this. It means someone believes in you. Now I'm giving it to you. Whenever you're scared, hold it tight and remember, I'm here. Emily reached out and touched the keychain with the tip of her finger. She didn't take it right away, but the faintest trace of wonder lit her eyes. Jonathan guided her to the guest room. The bed was made with fresh sheets and a soft night lamp shaped like a moon glowed on the table. He pulled the curtains closed and placed a light sweater on the chair. If you get cold, wear this, he said. And remember, I'll be right down the hall. If you need me, call for me anytime. Emily placed her teddy bear on the pillow, staring at the moon-shaped lamp. Uncle, was Mama ever afraid? Jonathan nodded gently. She was afraid she wouldn't get to see you grow up. But she believed the world would send good people to protect you. And she believed you'd find them. The little girl climbed into bed. Jonathan dimmed the lights, leaving a warm glow behind. Good night, Emily, he whispered. He closed the door softly but kept the hallway light on. Sitting in his study, he pulled out his wallet and stared at an old photo of Sarah, Emily's mother, smiling with the summer sun on her face. I'll keep my promise, he murmured. Meanwhile, across town, David Carter sat at a bar, liquor clouding his judgment. Vanessa leaned against him, whispering poison into his ear about signing away custody and control of Sarah's estate. Papers slid across the counter. David's hand trembled. His daughter's photo peeked from his wallet, reminding him of a love he had buried under alcohol and grief. But the voices around him grew louder, pressing him to sign. At a nearby table, a woman in a dark jacket watched quietly, her phone raised just enough to record. Detective Maria Santos, an experienced investigator, had been following Vanessa for weeks. And tonight, she caught the moment where David's shaking hand hovered over betrayal. Back in Manhattan, Emily finally closed her eyes, clutching her teddy bear and the small star-shaped keychain. For the first time since her mother's funeral, she drifted into sleep, not unafraid but at least no longer alone. And in that silence, a promise had been set into motion, one that would soon bring justice to light. The morning light filtered gently through the curtains, warming the soft sheets where Emily lay curled with her teddy bear. For a moment she forgot the storm of the night before. The moon-shaped lamp still glowed faintly beside her bed, left on by Jonathan so she would never feel alone in the dark. She stirred slowly, blinking her heavy eyes, then sat up, the bear tucked beneath her chin. Jonathan was already awake, seated in his study with a steaming cup of coffee. He had not slept much. Instead, he sat listening for any sound from the guest room, ready to go to her if she stirred in fear. When he finally heard the light creak of the bedroom door, he rose quietly. Emily stood there, her small curls tangled from sleep, holding her teddy tightly. She looked at him, unsure if she was even allowed to step further. "Good morning, sweetheart," Jonathan said warmly, lowering himself to her eye level. "Did you sleep okay?" Emily hesitated, then gave the tiniest nod. "The light stayed on," she whispered. Jonathan smiled. "That's right. And it'll stay on every night you need it." He led her to the dining table, where Miss Parker had already set out breakfast: toast, scrambled eggs, a small bowl of fruit, and a glass of milk. Jonathan spread a thin layer of butter on a slice of toast and set it in front of her. "Go on, eat," he encouraged. Emily lifted the toast carefully, nibbling at one edge. For a moment, it almost felt like the morning she remembered with her mother: warm food, a voice that wasn't raised in anger, and someone who cared if she ate. After breakfast, Jonathan crouched beside her chair. "Emily, today I want to take you to visit someone very kind. Mrs. Linda, your neighbor from across the street. She's been worried about you. Would you like that?" Emily's eyes softened. She remembered the elderly woman's voice from the night before, calling out from her window, insisting she had done nothing wrong. Emily nodded silently. Later that morning, Jonathan drove them back to Scarsdale. The house where Emily had been thrown out still stood silent, its door shut, its curtains drawn. Emily clutched Jonathan's hand tighter as they passed. At the next house, Mrs. Linda Green opened her door wide the moment she saw them. Tears welled in her eyes as she pulled Emily into a gentle embrace. "My dear child," she whispered, her voice trembling, I knocked, I begged him not to do it, but he wouldn't listen. Emily stood quietly in the embrace, her teddy bear squished between them. She didn't cry, she had cried too much the day before, but she leaned against the familiar warmth of a woman who saw her as she was, a child who deserved love. Inside they sat at the dining table. Linda's husband, Henry, a man of few words, placed cookies and water in front of them. His eyes, steady and kind, spoke more than any words. Jonathan took out his notebook and explained gently, "Mrs. Green, I may need to ask you some questions. I want to make sure Emily is safe. Would you mind if I recorded what you say?" Linda nodded firmly. Her voice shook at first, but she pressed on. "I saw her kneeling. She begged him not to send her out. But she trailed off, wiping her eyes. He pushed her anyway. And that woman, Vanessa, she told him to let the child go." Emily sat by the window listening. She pulled out a blank sheet of paper and a pencil from her pocket. Without a word she began to draw. Her small hands sketched a house with 3 figures. Her mother in the middle, herself on one side, and her stepfather on the other. But she drew him with his back turned. Jonathan's throat tightened when he saw it. "Would you like to tell me more, Emily?" he asked softly. The little girl kept her eyes on the drawing. "Aunt Vanessa said when Daddy signed the papers, I wouldn't be there anymore." Her pencil pressed harder, darkening the outline of the closed door she had drawn. Linda gripped Jonathan's hand. "You must do something. The girl can't take any more of this." Jonathan nodded. He pulled out his phone and dialed Michael Turner, his trusted colleague and one of the best family attorneys in New York. "Michael," Jonathan said as soon as he answered, "I need your help. We're talking about immediate protection for a child. I'll send you the evidence and witness statements today." "Send me everything," Turner replied firmly. "Videos, photos, testimonies. We'll request a temporary protective order and file for an emergency hearing. Bring the girl if she's comfortable, but make sure she rests first. We'll meet at my office this afternoon." Jonathan ended the call and turned back to Emily, who was staring at her drawing. He leaned closer. "No one can erase you from your home, Emily. And you're not alone anymore. I'll be with you every step." Emily looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with both fear and fragile trust. "But what if Daddy doesn't want me anymore?" Jonathan rested his hand gently on the back of her chair. "Then the law will answer that. But even so, there are still people who want you. I'm one of them." Linda slid a cup of cocoa toward Emily. "Sign your name on that drawing, dear," she urged softly. "That way it's your voice too." Emily carefully printed her name in block letters beneath the drawing. Next to it she drew a tiny star. Jonathan asked if he could keep the picture. She hesitated, then nodded. Before leaving, Henry handed Jonathan a folded paper. "I wrote down the times I heard shouting and saw the car parked. If needed, I'll speak." Jonathan shook his hand firmly. "Thank you. We'll call on you." As they stepped outside, Emily clutched her teddy bear tightly against her chest. Jonathan opened the car door for her and buckled her seatbelt. He asked softly, "Is there something you'd like to eat today? Anything at all?" She thought for a moment, then whispered, "Butter toast. And vanilla ice cream. But just a little." Jonathan smiled. "Toast for now. Ice cream later after we meet my friend." Meanwhile, across town, David Carter sat slumped at a bar, his glass empty, his eyes heavy. Vanessa leaned close, her red lips brushing his ear. Papers lay spread in front of him, waiting for his signature. "You're exhausted," she cooed. "The girl looks too much like her mother. She drags you back into pain. Sign the papers, David. I'll take care of the rest. No one will trouble you anymore." David's hand shook as he pulled out his wallet. A photo peeked out, himself, his late wife Sarah, and a much younger Emily, smiling in the afternoon sun. His throat tightened. But Mark Sullivan, his drinking companion, chuckled darkly. "Come on, man. Just sign it. Get it over with. You'll finally have peace." David gritted his teeth. "Not tonight," he muttered. Vanessa's eyes flashed with irritation. She pressed the pen into his hand. "Just one signature, David. That's all it takes." At a corner table, Detective Maria Santos raised her phone discreetly. The faint click of her camera blended with the hum of the bar. She captured every image: the papers, Vanessa's whisper, David's trembling hand. She had been following Vanessa long enough to know the woman's game. Tonight she had proof. That afternoon, Jonathan and Emily arrived at Michael Turner's law office. Turner greeted them with a steady handshake. "We have enough to request an emergency hearing," he said after reviewing the files. "The neighbor's testimony is solid, the drawing is powerful, and Maria's photos will tie everything together." Emily sat quietly in a chair, hugging her teddy bear. She looked up at Jonathan, her voice small but certain. "I trust you." Jonathan bent down, brushing her curls gently from her forehead. "And I promise you, I will not let you down." The storm was just beginning. The next morning, Manhattan Family Court loomed tall and intimidating, its stone steps crowded with people moving quickly through the brisk air. To most, it was just another day of hearings. But for 6-year-old Emily, it was the place where her future would be decided. Jonathan walked beside her, his large, steady hand wrapped around her small one. She clutched her teddy bear in her other arm, pressing it so close it almost disappeared beneath her chin. Attorney Michael Turner led the way, his briefcase heavy with files and evidence. His calm, deliberate pace was meant to show Emily that this was not a place where she would be alone or voiceless. Inside the courthouse hallway, the fluorescent lights seemed too bright, the air heavy with quiet footsteps and hushed conversations. Emily's wide eyes darted around, but Jonathan leaned down, whispering, "Don't be afraid. You don't need to fight this battle alone. That's why we're here." When the courtroom doors opened, Judge Patricia Coleman sat at the bench, her presence commanding but not unkind. She was a woman in her early 50s, known for her fairness, her voice firm yet steady. She began the hearing by reminding everyone, the welfare of the child is the priority of this court. On the plaintiff's side sat Jonathan and Turner, with Emily tucked gently between them. Across the aisle, Vanessa entered as though walking onto a stage. Her sleek dress drew every eye, her golden curls arranged with perfection. Beside her, David Carter followed slowly. His shirt was rumpled, his face pale, his eyes downcast. And next to him, their attorney, Peter Dawson, a sharp-tongued man known for tearing apart witnesses, sorted through his papers with an air of superiority. Vanessa leaned close to David, whispering sharply, "You have to prove the girl isn't stable. If you hesitate, we lose everything." David gave no reply. His fingers shook as he sat, his wallet heavy in his pocket with the old photo he had tried so hard to forget. Judge Coleman glanced around the room. "Counsel, present your case." Turner rose first, his voice calm but resolute. "Your Honor, we are here today to request an emergency protective order for Emily Carter, a 6-year-old child expelled from her home following the death of her mother. We present testimony, photographs, and recorded evidence that this child has been neglected and targeted for manipulation regarding her late mother's estate." He handed over the USB drive from Detective Maria Santos. The clerk accepted it and logged it for the record. Peter Dawson rose smoothly, his voice cold. "Your Honor, the defense rejects these exaggerated claims. The child is unstable and fabricates stories. To prove this, we submit a psychological evaluation." He slid a stack of papers across the table. Jonathan leaned toward Turner, murmuring under his breath, "Stay sharp. They're reaching." Judge Coleman scanned the document briefly, then raised a brow. "Who conducted this evaluation?" "For privacy," Dawson answered quickly, "we request the individual's name be withheld at this stage." The judge tapped her gavel lightly. "Without identification or professional verification, this document will not be considered valid evidence. If the defense wishes to rely on it, they will need proper certification." Vanessa's confident smile flickered. Dawson's jaw tightened, but he nodded stiffly. Turner stood again. "Your Honor, we request to call Mrs. Linda Green as a witness." From the back row, Linda Green walked slowly to the stand, her hands trembling slightly as she swore her oath. She glanced at Emily, offering her a small smile before speaking. "I saw it myself," she said firmly. "That little girl begged not to be put out. She knelt on the floor, crying. But David still pushed her away. Aunt Vanessa told him to let her go. Her voice cracked, but she held her ground. Jonathan glanced at Emily, who sat with her teddy bear pressed tightly to her chest. "You're not alone," he whispered to her. It was Emily's turn. Turner lifted her gently onto the stand, keeping a steady hand on her shoulder until she was balanced. He bent close and whispered, "Just tell the truth, Emily. That's all you need to do." Her small voice filled the silent room. "Aunt Vanessa told me, when Daddy signed the papers, I wouldn't be there anymore." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Jonathan's jaw tightened. Turner's eyes sharpened. Dawson stepped forward, trying to corner her. "Emily, do you know that lying is wrong?" She nodded quietly. "I know." "Have you ever made up a story just so Mr. Jonathan would give you gifts?" Dawson pressed. Jonathan stood at once. "Objection, Your Honor." Leading and insulting to the child. Judge Coleman's voice cut firm and clear. "Sustained. Counsel, stick to facts." Turner approached gently. "Emily, can you tell the court why you were afraid to go home that night?" Her lips trembled. She squeezed the teddy bear tighter. "Because Aunt Vanessa said when Daddy finished signing the papers, I wouldn't be there anymore." The room fell into stillness. Vanessa shifted uneasily in her chair, shooting David a glare. David stared at the table, his knuckles white against the wood. Turner laid another folder before the judge. "Your Honor, we also submit evidence of financial transfers tied to Vanessa Blake and Carla White, along with photographs taken by Detective Maria Santos last night." The clerk placed the files into the record. Judge Coleman scanned them, her brow tightening. Jonathan leaned down, whispering into Emily's ear. "You're doing so well. I'm right here." Emily looked across the room at her stepfather. Her voice, though soft, carried weight. "Daddy, do you remember the day we went to Central Park? You bought me vanilla ice cream. One melted all over my hand and you laughed before licking it clean. You folded a paper boat from a receipt and said if the wind was good, it would float to where Mama was standing." David froze. His breath caught. His vision blurred. The memory struck him like a blow. Vanessa hissed under her breath, "Don't you dare waver now." But David couldn't look away from Emily. His lips trembled. For the first time in weeks, he saw not a burden, but the little girl who once clung to his shoulders, laughing in the sunlight. "I was wrong," he whispered, barely audible. Vanessa stiffened. Her mask of confidence cracked. Dawson quickly stood. "Your Honor, the defense objects. This court is no place for emotional theatrics. We must remain focused on professional documentation." Jonathan rose, his voice calm but firm. "A child cannot invent longing. What she remembers is not performance, it is truth." Judge Coleman lifted her hand. "Enough. This courtroom will not be used for personal attacks. Return to fact-based questioning." But the tide had already begun to turn. Vanessa's eyes narrowed, fury simmering beneath her painted smile. David sat broken, haunted by his daughter's words. And across the courtroom, Detective Maria Santos closed her notebook, waiting. She had not yet spoken, but her evidence was ready. When the time came, the truth would be undeniable. For the first time since the hearing began, Emily felt the smallest surge of courage. She lifted her chin, looked at Jonathan, then at her father, and whispered, "I just want to be loved again." The room fell into a heavy silence. And in that moment, everyone knew the battle was far from over. Into a tense silence. Every eye rested on Emily, the small black child whose trembling voice had already shifted the atmosphere of the trial. Her memory of ice cream and paper boats had cracked David's armor, but the case was far from over. Judge Coleman tapped her gavel lightly. "We will move forward," she said firmly. Michael Turner stood, his voice calm but steady. "Your Honor, at this time we request Detective Maria Santos be allowed to present evidence of financial misconduct tied to Vanessa Blake." All eyes turned as Detective Maria stepped forward. She wore a simple dark jacket, her presence composed but sharp. Her eyes moved across the courtroom, stopping briefly on Vanessa before turning to the judge. "Your Honor," Maria began, "I was present last night at a bar in Scarsdale. I observed Ms. Blake pressuring Mr. Carter to sign over temporary control of his late wife's estate. I obtained photographic and audio evidence. The clerk connected a USB drive to the projector. On the wall, images appeared. David slumped at the bar, Vanessa leaning close, a pen in his hand hovering over the documents. In another frame, Carla White, Vanessa's friend, could be seen slipping an envelope into Vanessa's handbag. Vanessa's confident smile faltered. She shifted in her seat, whispering quickly to Dawson, but his face had already paled. Maria continued. Additionally, bank records confirmed 2 separate transfers from Sarah Carter's estate fund into an account under the name CW Consulting. That account belongs to Carla White, a known associate of Ms. Blake. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Coleman's brow tightened. Bring forward the witness, she ordered. The bailiff opened the door and Carla White stepped inside. She looked much younger than Vanessa, her heavy makeup unable to hide the anxiety written on her face. She clutched her purse tightly as she was escorted to the stand. State your name, the clerk instructed. Carla White, she answered, her voice trembling. Turner approached gently. Ms. White, did you receive funds from Sarah Carter's estate? Carla swallowed hard. Yes. Vanessa shot to her feet. She's lying. This is fabricated. Sit down, Ms. Blake, Judge Coleman said sharply, striking her gavel. You will have your turn. Turner leaned forward. Ms. White, please explain to the court what happened. Carla glanced at Vanessa, then turned away, unable to meet her gaze. Vanessa told me to open a company account, just a shell, she said. The money would move through me and then I'd transfer it back to her. She told me it was just temporary, just paperwork. I didn't think it would go this far. Gasps echoed through the room. Vanessa slammed her palm on the table. You got your share, Carla? Don't pretend you're innocent. Order in the court. Judge Coleman's gavel struck hard. Another outburst like that and you will be removed. Carla's shoulders slumped. She whispered, she told me, once David signed the papers the girl wouldn't be there anymore. Emily flinched at those words, hugging her teddy bear so tightly it seemed she wanted to disappear into it. Jonathan bent down, whispering gently, It's okay, sweetheart. The truth is coming out. David's hands shook where they rested on the table. His breath grew uneven. He pressed his palm against his forehead, guilt pressing down on him like a weight too heavy to bear. Judge Coleman turned her sharp gaze on Vanessa. Do you wish to explain the transfer orders? Vanessa straightened her back, her smile brittle. I only wanted to help David. The girl, she always dragged him back to the past. I was protecting him. Jonathan rose, his voice calm but cutting. No one asked you to erase a child. You chose this yourself. The tension snapped. David lifted his head slowly, for the first time facing Vanessa fully. His voice cracked, low and broken. I let you do it. I let you convince me. I bear my share of the blame. The courtroom stilled. Vanessa's eyes widened, her mask of charm shattered. From the back row, Linda Green clasped her husband's hand tightly. Emily looked up at her father, confusion and longing in her eyes. This was the first time she had heard him admit fault, even in fragments. Judge Coleman closed the file before her. The court will recess for deliberation. Tomorrow morning we will reconvene and deliver a ruling regarding temporary custody and the charges against Ms. Blake. Her gavel struck once, firm and final. The courtroom emptied slowly. Reporters whispered near the hallway, sensing a scandal. Carla avoided Vanessa's glare, rushing out with her head down. Detective Maria tucked her notebook away, giving Jonathan and Turner a slight nod. We're not done yet, she said quietly. Jonathan turned to Emily. You were brave today. Do you know that? Emily looked down at her bear, her voice so soft it was almost a breath. I was scared. Jonathan crouched to meet her eyes. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you told the truth anyway. That's the strongest thing anyone can do. David stood a short distance away, uncertain. He wanted to approach his daughter but knew the gap between them could not be crossed so easily. He whispered almost to himself, I'll make this right. No matter how long it takes. Emily's small face turned toward him for a moment. She did not smile, but she didn't turn away either. Jonathan placed a steady hand on her shoulder. Let's go home now. You need rest. Together they stepped into the hallway, their steps measured and strong. The battle was far from over, but the tide had turned. Vanessa sat frozen at the defense table, her fury boiling just beneath the surface. For the first time she realized the walls around her schemes were crumbling. And for the first time, Emily realized that even though her world had been broken apart, there were people fighting to build it back up, piece by piece, truth by truth. The next morning the courtroom was filled to capacity. The air was heavy with anticipation, as though everyone present knew something decisive was about to unfold. The bailiff called for order, and soon Judge Patricia Coleman entered, her black robe swaying as she ascended to the bench. All rise, the clerk called. Everyone stood. When the judge took her seat, the room sat back down, silence settling like a thick blanket. Jonathan gently guided Emily into her chair, placing her teddy bear in her lap. She held onto it tightly, her small hands trembling. Michael Turner sat beside them, his files neatly arranged. Across the aisle, Vanessa Blake adjusted her fitted dress and forced a smile that no longer reached her eyes. Her lawyer, Peter Dawson, looked less confident than before, his jaw set but his hands restless on the table. David Carter sat hunched, his shoulders sagging as though carrying the weight of every mistake he had made. His eyes avoided his daughter's, though the pull to look at her was almost unbearable. Judge Coleman began in her steady voice. We will reconvene the matter of Emily Carter. Testimonies have been heard. Evidence has been presented. Before the court delivers a ruling, Detective Santos has requested to submit additional material. Detective Maria Santos rose from her seat. She stepped into the center of the room, her dark jacket simple, her face calm but sharp with focus. She handed a USB to the clerk. Your Honor, this recording was made at the bar last night. It captures Ms. Blake's direct words regarding the removal of Emily Carter. The screen on the wall flickered. Then the audio began to play. Vanessa's voice filled the courtroom, unmistakable. Sign it and the girl will disappear. I'll take care of the rest. A chill swept through the room. Every whisper ceased. Emily flinched, burying her face into her teddy bear. Jonathan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. David's head snapped up. His face paled as the sound of Vanessa's voice replayed in his ears. He pressed his shaking hands against the table, his breathing uneven. That's a lie. Vanessa shot up, her voice shrill. It's taken out of context. You can't. Sit down, Ms. Blake, Judge Coleman said sharply, striking her gavel. But the unraveling had begun. Turner stood calmly. Your Honor, we also submit bank statements confirming financial transfers from Sarah Carter's estate to an account under Carla White. These transactions directly implicate Ms. Blake in fraud. The clerk distributed the documents. The judge scanned them, her expression hardening. Peter Dawson tried to recover, his voice rising. Your Honor, this is an attempt to paint my client as a criminal without due process. Maria cut him off smoothly. The due process begins with evidence, counselor. And we have plenty. The bailiff opened the door. Carla White was brought in again under subpoena. She walked to the stand, her eyes downcast, shoulders slumped. Ms. White, Judge Coleman said firmly, you are under oath. Did Ms. Blake instruct you to create accounts and transfer funds? Carla nodded quickly. Yes, Your Honor. She said it was temporary, that once David signed everything over, the child would be gone and it would all be ours to manage. I thought it was just money. I didn't realize. Vanessa exploded, her mask shattering completely. Shut up, Carla. You're no better than me. You got your share. Order, the judge thundered, slamming the gavel. Ms. Blake, one more outburst and I will have you removed from this courtroom. David's hands trembled violently. He stood slowly, his voice breaking. My God, what have I done? All eyes turned to him. His face was pale, streaked with sweat, his eyes bloodshot. I let her convince me. I let her poison my mind. I turned my back on my little girl. His voice cracked. I threw her away. Emily looked up at him, her lips quivering. She wanted to run to him, but fear still anchored her feet. Jonathan leaned close to her, whispering, You don't have to decide anything today. Just listen. David's voice shook as he continued, "Judge, I abandoned my wife's memory. I betrayed Emily. I don't deserve to be her father." His words faltered, but they rang with painful honesty. The courtroom was still, every person silent. Vanessa's face twisted with fury. She turned toward David, her voice sharp as broken glass. "Coward. You'll regret this. Do you think siding with that child will save you?" "Enough." Judge Coleman slammed her gavel. "Miss Blake, you will respect this court. Your actions speak for themselves." Michael Turner stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Your Honor, the child's safety is at risk. We request immediate removal of Ms. Blake's influence, recognition of fraudulent activity, and temporary guardianship for Emily Carter under Jonathan Reed, with supervised visitation rights for David Carter pending evaluation." The judge nodded slowly. She closed the files before her, folding her hands atop them. After reviewing the testimonies, evidence, and independent verification of financial records, she began, her voice even and clear, "This court finds Ms. Vanessa Blake guilty of fraud and intentional manipulation of estate assets. Custody of Emily Carter will not be influenced by Ms. Blake. The matter of criminal charges will be referred to a higher court." Gasps rippled through the room. Vanessa's face drained of color. Judge Coleman continued, "As for Emily Carter, this court orders temporary guardianship to be shared between Jonathan Reed and David Carter, under the supervision of the Child Protection Agency. All visitation shall be scheduled and monitored by the appointed social worker. Any outside influence must be approved by this court." The gavel struck firmly. "This is the order of the court." Vanessa's body shook with rage. She tried to stand, but the bailiff stepped forward, ready to restrain her. She glared at Jonathan, her voice a hiss. "This isn't over." Jonathan remained calm, his hand resting protectively on Emily's shoulder. "For her sake, Vanessa," he said quietly, "it is." David sat frozen, his hands covering his face. His shoulders shook as silent sobs broke free. For the first time, Emily saw her stepfather's guilt laid bare. She hugged her teddy bear tighter, whispering to herself, "Mama, it's ending. It's really ending." Linda Green dabbed her eyes in the back row. Henry squeezed her hand, murmuring, "The truth always comes out." Jonathan bent down to Emily's level. "You were so brave," he said softly. "This is the beginning of something better." Emily didn't smile, but for the first time she let her tiny hand rest in his. The storm had not fully cleared, but the darkest clouds had begun to break apart. The courthouse emptied in waves that afternoon, but the story was far from over. Outside, the cool wind carried the murmurs of reporters who had already caught wind of the scandal. Cameras flashed as Vanessa Blake stormed out of the courthouse, her heels clicking furiously against the pavement. But before she could climb into the waiting car, two detectives stepped forward, blocking her path. "Ms. Blake," one of them announced, "you are under arrest for fraud, attempted coercion, and obstruction of justice." The color drained from her face. "This is ridiculous," she spat, jerking back. "You can't do this. David, say something." But David Carter stood frozen a few steps away, his face hollow, his body sagging as if every ounce of energy had drained from him. He didn't move to defend her. He didn't say a word. The officers snapped handcuffs around Vanessa's wrists. She thrashed, her voice rising to a shriek. "You'll regret this. I'll take all of you down with me." Reporters surged forward, microphones outstretched, questions flying like arrows. Flashes illuminated Vanessa's twisted face as she was pushed into the back of the police vehicle. For the first time, the carefully constructed image of grace and control had shattered in front of the entire city. Emily watched from the courthouse steps, holding Jonathan's hand tightly. Her wide eyes reflected the flashing lights, her small frame stiff with unease. "Why are they taking her?" she asked softly. Jonathan crouched beside her, speaking gently. "Because she broke the law, sweetheart. When people do wrong, they must face the truth." Emily pressed her teddy bear against her chest, whispering, "But she said Daddy didn't want me anymore." Jonathan's heart ached. "Vanessa wanted you to believe that. But lies don't win forever. You're here now and you're not alone." Emily nodded faintly, though her face carried more questions than answers. Later that evening, back at Jonathan's townhouse, the quiet was a welcome relief. Miss Parker had prepared a warm dinner, vegetable soup and fresh bread, but Emily ate little. She sat curled in the corner of the couch, sketching in a notebook Jonathan had given her. Her drawing was simple: a house with two figures holding hands, one small and one tall. On the other side of the page, a woman stood outside, frowning. Jonathan saw it when he passed by and said nothing. Sometimes drawings spoke louder than words. That night, after Emily was asleep, Jonathan sat with David in the study. David had insisted on coming, not to fight but to confess. His face was pale, his eyes rimmed red from hours of silent tears. "I don't know how I became this man," David whispered, staring into his hands. "I loved Sarah more than anything. After she died, I lost myself." Vanessa filled the silence. "She told me I could start over. But she taught me to see Emily as a shadow instead of a blessing." His voice broke. "I betrayed my own child." Jonathan listened quietly, his expression steady. "Guilt is easy," he finally said. "Redemption is harder. The question is, what will you do now?" David shook his head slowly. "I don't know if Emily will ever forgive me." "Forgiveness takes time," Jonathan replied. "But she's still a child. What she needs most is truth and consistency. If you want to be her father again, prove it, not with words but with action." David's eyes glistened. "Do you think she'll give me that chance?" Jonathan looked toward the hallway, where the faint glow of Emily's nightlight shone beneath her door. "That's not up to me. It's up to her. But if you mean it, don't waste another day." The next week, Emily began therapy. Jonathan drove her to a small office near Central Park, where a gentle-faced black woman named Dr. Angela Moore welcomed her warmly. "Hi, Emily," Dr. Moore said softly, kneeling so her eyes met Emily's. "Would you like to sit with your teddy while we talk?" Emily nodded, settling into the small couch. Her legs swung nervously as she clutched the bear. Dr. Moore spoke gently, asking about Emily's favorite colors, her drawings, the things that made her feel safe. Slowly, Emily's small voice began to open. She spoke of her mother's lullabies, of vanilla ice cream in the park, of how she missed laughter in the house. Then her words faltered. Her eyes grew wet as she whispered, "Sometimes I feel like I don't belong anywhere. Like I'm just extra." Jonathan, sitting nearby, felt his chest tighten. But Dr. Moore reached over, her tone soothing. "You belong, Emily. What happened to you was not your fault. You are worthy of love, and you always will be." Emily's lips trembled. For the first time, she let herself cry openly, her small body trembling. Jonathan moved closer, resting his hand gently on her back. He didn't speak, he just let her feel safe enough to let the tears fall. When the session ended, Dr. Moore smiled softly. "She's strong," she said to Jonathan in private. "What she needs most is stability and patience. You're giving her that." Jonathan nodded, his voice low. "She's giving me more than I could ever give her." Meanwhile, Vanessa's arrest dominated the headlines. Newspapers splashed her photo across the front pages. "Socialite arrested in estate fraud scandal." Talk shows dissected her downfall, painting her as manipulative, cunning, and heartless. In jail, Vanessa seethed. The charm she once wielded like a weapon meant nothing behind bars. She vowed vengeance, but the walls around her were closing fast. David, meanwhile, began the slow process of rebuilding. He attended counseling sessions, spoke honestly about his grief for Sarah, and admitted publicly that he had failed Emily. It was not enough to undo the harm, but it was the first step toward change. One evening, Jonathan and Emily sat on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. She leaned against him, her small body warm against his side. "Will Daddy ever be better?" she asked quietly. Jonathan looked out over the skyline. "He's trying, Emily. Sometimes people lose their way. But sometimes, they find the courage to come back." She thought about this for a long time before whispering, "I don't know if I can trust him again." Jonathan placed his arm gently around her. "You don't have to decide now. Trust is something that grows like a seed. We'll wait and see if he takes care of it." Emily nodded, her eyelids heavy with sleep. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to rest against someone without fear. Jonathan watched her, his heart steady. The battle had scarred them all, but in this moment he knew one truth: Emily was not broken. She was still here, still fighting, and still capable of love. and he would do everything in his power to make sure she never felt unwanted again. A week had passed since the verdict, and though the storm had quieted, the air around Emily's world was still fragile. Vanessa sat behind bars, stripped of the influence she had once wielded. The newspapers had moved on to fresher scandals, but the wounds she left behind remained. At Jonathan's townhouse, Emily was slowly finding a rhythm: morning walks to school, afternoons with Miss Parker, and evenings sketching or reading beside Jonathan's armchair. Yet there was one truth everyone knew but no one could rush: Emily had not yet faced her father. That Saturday morning the doorbell rang. Jonathan opened the door to find David standing there, his hands clasped tightly, his shoulders hunched. He looked smaller somehow, as though the guilt he carried had shaven years off his frame. "Good morning," David said quietly. May I see her?" Jonathan studied him for a long moment. The man before him was not the cold figure from the courtroom. His eyes were tired, red-rimmed, and searching. "She's here," Jonathan said finally. "But only if she wants to see you. That choice is hers now." David nodded, his Adam's apple bobbing. "That's fair." Inside, Emily sat cross-legged on the rug, coloring a picture of a sunflower. She looked up as Jonathan knelt beside her. "Sweetheart," he said gently, "your dad is here. He'd like to talk to you. But only if you want to." Her little hands froze over the crayons. Her eyes widened, filling with a mixture of fear and curiosity. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, in a voice so small it was almost a whisper, she asked, "Will you stay with me?" "Of course," Jonathan assured her. When David stepped inside the living room, Emily stiffened. She clutched her teddy bear tightly, her wide eyes locked on him. David's breath caught. She was so small, yet the wall between them felt impossibly large. "Hi, Emily," he said softly. His voice cracked as he tried to smile. "It's been a while." Emily didn't answer. She tucked her face halfway into her bear, watching him carefully. David lowered himself slowly into a chair across the room, making sure to keep distance. "I don't expect you to talk to me. I just wanted to see you. And to say I'm sorry." Jonathan sat nearby, silent but steady, his presence like a shield between them. David's voice trembled. "I should never have listened to Vanessa. I should never have shut you out. You didn't do anything wrong. You've only ever wanted love and his throat tightened. "I failed you." Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't move. For a long time, silence stretched between them. Finally, she whispered, "Why didn't you want me anymore?" The question hit David like a blade. His chest heaved, his eyes wet. He leaned forward, his voice breaking. "I never stopped wanting you, Emily. I let someone convince me that you were a burden, when in truth you were the only piece of your mother I had left. I see that now. And I will regret it for the rest of my life." Jonathan's steady gaze never left David. He could tell the words were genuine, pulled from a place of raw honesty. But it wasn't his forgiveness that mattered. It was Emily's. Emily hugged her teddy so tightly her knuckles turned white. She didn't answer. She simply turned her face into Jonathan's side, whispering, "I'm tired." Jonathan stroked her hair gently. "Okay, sweetheart." He looked up at David. "That's enough for today. Small steps." David nodded, his eyes shining with unshed tears. He stood slowly, his shoulders slumped. At the door he turned back. "Thank you for protecting her when I didn't." Jonathan gave a quiet nod but said nothing. The following week, Emily attended her second therapy session with Dr. Angela Moore. This time David joined them. Jonathan sat in the corner, letting the focus rest on father and daughter. Dr. Moore began softly. "Emily, sometimes when people hurt us, we carry heavy feelings inside. Today we're going to practice saying those feelings out loud." Emily's small hands twisted in her lap. She glanced at David, then back at the floor. "Would you like to tell your dad how you felt when he left you that night?" Dr. Moore prompted gently. Emily's lips trembled. She whispered, "I felt like garbage." David flinched. His eyes filled, but he didn't interrupt. Emily's voice grew stronger. "I felt like I didn't matter. Like you didn't want me because I wasn't good enough." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I wanted you to love me, but you didn't." The words hung heavy in the room. David's hands shook, but he forced himself to meet her gaze. His voice was low, raw. You mattered more than anything, Emily. You were never garbage. You were my daughter. I was broken and I let someone else twist my heart. I made the worst mistake a father can make. And if you never forgive me, I'll still spend every day trying to earn back your trust. Emily looked at him for the first time, really looked. She didn't speak. She simply hugged her teddy and turned toward Jonathan, her safe anchor. Dr. Moore nodded gently. That's enough for today. Healing takes time, Emily. You don't have to decide everything now. That evening, back at Jonathan's home, Emily climbed into bed quietly. Jonathan tucked her in, smoothing her hair. Do you think Daddy means it? She asked softly. Jonathan sat on the edge of the bed. I think he does. But words are only the beginning. He has to show you with his actions. Emily hugged her bear. I don't know if I can love him again. Jonathan's voice was calm. You don't have to rush. Love isn't gone, it's just hiding under the hurt. If he works hard, maybe it will come back. If not, you still have people who love you deeply. That will never change. For the first time, Emily allowed a faint smile. Like you. Jonathan's throat tightened. Yes, like me. She closed her eyes, whispering, I'm glad you found me. Jonathan leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. So am I, sweetheart. So am I. As she drifted into sleep, Jonathan sat quietly in the chair by her bed, watching her chest rise and fall. The battle wasn't over. The wounds hadn't healed. But a seed had been planted, one of hope, of possibility, of rebuilding what had been broken. And Jonathan vowed, silently but fiercely, that no matter how long it took, Emily would never be left to face her pain alone again. Weeks passed, and the sharp edges of the courtroom battle began to soften into a new rhythm. Vanessa remained behind bars, awaiting trial for her crimes. She no longer cast a shadow over Emily's daily life, and though the wound she left was deep, the silence without her was a kind of healing. David, meanwhile, began walking the long road of change. At first, Emily didn't believe it. She had seen his failures too closely to trust words alone. But Jonathan insisted on keeping her informed. He wanted her to see, not just hear, if her father was truly making the effort. David checked himself into grief counseling, facing his years of unresolved pain after Sarah's death. He joined a parenting group for fathers rebuilding relationships. He even started volunteering at a local community center, helping kids with after-school programs. For the first time in years, he was learning to listen, to show up, to be present. But the question remained, would Emily ever let him back in? One Saturday afternoon, Jonathan and Emily visited the community center quietly. Emily clutched her teddy bear, her wide eyes darting nervously as children ran and laughed across the gym. At the far end, David knelt on the floor beside a group of kids, showing them how to build a paper rocket from construction paper and tape. His hands were steady, his voice patient. When the rockets launched across the room, the children squealed with delight, running to retrieve them. Emily watched silently, half hidden behind Jonathan's leg. Her small voice whispered, "He looks different." Jonathan crouched beside her. "Sometimes people can change if they really try. Do you want to go closer?" She shook her head quickly, hugging her teddy tighter. But her eyes never left her father. David glanced up and saw her. For a moment his breath caught. He didn't rush toward her. He didn't call out. He simply smiled softly, gave a small wave, and then returned his attention to the kids at his table. Emily blinked, surprised. She whispered, "He didn't come running." Jonathan smiled gently. "Because he knows you need space. That's his way of showing respect." Something shifted in Emily's eyes. The wall she had built didn't crumble, but a small crack formed, letting the first light through. Later that week, Emily sat with Jonathan on the balcony, sketching quietly in her notebook. This time she drew two figures, herself and Jonathan, sitting on a bench. Off to the side, a man stood, holding a small flower in his hand. Jonathan studied the drawing, his heart tightening. "Who's that?" he asked gently. Emily hesitated, then whispered, "Daddy. He's waiting." "I don't know if I should take the flower." Jonathan placed a hand over hers. "You don't have to decide today. Trust isn't built in one moment, it's built in many. Take your time, Emily. You're allowed to." She nodded, pressing her lips together, deep in thought. The next milestone came during another therapy session with Dr. Moore. This time, David brought a small photo album. "Emily," he said carefully, sliding it across the table. "I thought you might like to see these. They're pictures of you with your mom." Emily froze. Her eyes darted to Jonathan for reassurance. He nodded softly. With trembling hands she opened the album. Inside were snapshots of her as a baby, wrapped in Sarah's arms, giggling in the park, dressed for her first birthday. Her mother's smile radiated from every page, warm and full of love. Tears welled in Emily's eyes. She traced her finger over one picture, whispering, "I don't remember this day." David's voice cracked. "I do. She held you like you were her whole world. And you were. You still are." For the first time, Emily's eyes lifted to meet his. They didn't linger, but they held for a second longer than before. Dr. Moore spoke softly. "This is a good start. Emily, you can choose what pieces of your father's love you're ready to hold on to. You're in control now." Emily nodded faintly, closing the album. "I'll think about it." That night, Jonathan sat awake long after Emily had gone to bed. He stared out at the city skyline, the hum of traffic in the distance. He had stepped into Emily's life as a guardian, a protector, a rescuer when she was cast aside. But now, as he watched her cautiously rediscover her father, he wondered, what role would he play in her future? Would he remain the steady hand guiding her through childhood? Would he one day step back if David truly transformed into the father Emily needed? Or would his bond with her become something permanent, unshakable, like a second parent? The questions weighed heavily, but he didn't speak them aloud. For now what mattered was that Emily was healing, slowly, painfully but surely. The turning point came unexpectedly on a rainy Sunday. Jonathan and Emily had gone to the park, umbrellas shielding them from the drizzle. To their surprise, David was there too, volunteering with a group cleaning up trash along the pathways. Emily spotted him before Jonathan did. She froze, clutching her bear beneath her raincoat. For a long moment she said nothing. Then quietly she whispered, "Can we give him a hand?" Jonathan looked at her, surprised. "Are you sure?" She nodded, though her grip on the bear was tight. Together they walked toward David. He looked up, startled but grateful, as Emily bent to pick up a plastic bottle with her small hands. For the first time in months, father and daughter stood side by side, not as enemies, not as strangers, but as two people taking the first fragile step toward something new. David's eyes filled with tears. He whispered, "Thank you." Emily didn't answer. She just kept working, her little face determined. But Jonathan saw it, the smallest flicker of hope breaking through her guarded walls. That night, Emily told Jonathan quietly, "I don't forgive him yet. But maybe I can try." Jonathan's throat tightened. He smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "That's more than enough, sweetheart. Trying is the bravest step of all." As she drifted into sleep, Jonathan sat in the dim light, feeling a mix of relief and uncertainty. The road ahead was still long, filled with tests and fragile moments. But tonight he knew one thing for certain. Emily had found her voice. And with every small step she chose, she was slowly taking back the power that had once been stolen from her. Months later, the city courthouse was crowded once again, but this time the story was different. The people weren't here for a custody battle. They were here for Vanessa Blake's sentencing. The trial had been swift, her crimes undeniable. Fraud, coercion, estate manipulation, obstruction of justice. The charges had stacked like bricks until even her most expensive lawyers couldn't shield her. The recordings, the bank records, Carla White's testimony, together they left no room for doubt. Vanessa entered the courtroom in prison garb, her once polished image stripped away. The woman who had once moved through society's circles with charm and control now looked brittle, her face hardened, her eyes sharp with bitterness. Judge Coleman read the sentence in a steady voice. "Vanessa Blake, this court sentences you to 10 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 5 years. This is for your role in the deliberate manipulation of a minor's custody and the fraudulent management of estate funds." The gavel struck. For the first time, Vanessa's composure cracked. She shouted, "This isn't justice. You're all fools. That girl will ruin everything." The bailiffs restrained her, leading her out as she kicked and screamed. But her words no longer carried weight. She was gone. Emily sat beside Jonathan, clutching her teddy bear. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She simply whispered, "It's really over." Jonathan nodded gently. "Yes, sweetheart. It's over." In the months that followed, life settled into something new. David didn't vanish. He worked harder than anyone expected. Every week he showed up to therapy. He volunteered consistently at the community center. He attended parenting classes. And most importantly, he never pushed Emily. When she wanted space, he gave it. When she wanted silence, he respected it. And when she asked him questions, about her mother, about the past, about why he had failed her, he answered honestly, no matter how painful. It was not a quick healing. Trust wasn't rebuilt overnight. But brick by brick, moment by moment, David began to lay the foundation of something fragile but real. One spring afternoon, Emily visited the community center again. This time she walked up to her father without hiding behind Jonathan. She held out a drawing, a picture of herself holding hands with both David and Jonathan. David's hands shook as he took it. "Does this mean?" His voice broke. Emily looked at him steadily. "It means you can try. But Jonathan is staying too." David's eyes filled with tears. He nodded. "Then I'll be grateful for every chance you give me." Jonathan, meanwhile, continued being her steady anchor. He helped with homework, tucked her in at night, and listened to her when the nightmares came. He never tried to take Sarah's place, nor push David aside. Instead, he became something new, something Emily chose. One evening, Emily looked up at him and asked, "Can I call you Uncle Jonathan?" Jonathan's heart swelled. He smiled gently. "You can call me anything you like." From that day she did. And with each passing week, the bond between them grew deeper, not out of duty but out of chosen love. The final piece of healing came during a therapy session months later. Dr. Moore asked Emily, "What does family mean to you now?" Emily thought for a long time, then answered with a clarity beyond her years. "Family is people who don't leave. People who don't make me feel small. People who love me even when it's hard." Dr. Moore nodded. "And do you feel you have that now?" Emily smiled softly. "Yes, I do." That summer, Jonathan took Emily and David to the park where Sarah used to take her as a toddler. They sat beneath the wide oak tree, the sun casting dappled light over the grass. Emily ran ahead, her laughter ringing through the air as she chased a butterfly. David watched her with awe. "She's stronger than both of us," he said quietly. Jonathan nodded. "She always was. We just had to stop failing her long enough to let her show it." David turned to him, his voice low. "Thank you, for being there when I wasn't." Jonathan looked at him steadily. "Don't thank me. Just don't waste the chance you've been given now." David nodded, his jaw tight with determination. "I won't." As the sun dipped low, Emily ran back to them, holding the butterfly gently in her hands before letting it fly away. She plopped down between them, her teddy bear still tucked under her arm. "Did you see?" she said proudly. "I caught it, but then I let it go. Because it deserved to be free." Jonathan smiled, brushing her curls back from her face. "That's right, sweetheart. Just like you." Emily leaned against them both, her small voice soft but certain. "I'm not scared anymore." And for the first time it was true. The shadows that had once clouded her world were gone. In their place was light, fragile but steady, carried by love, truth, and resilience. Emily Carter, the little black girl who had once been cast aside, was no longer voiceless. She had claimed her place, her family, and her future. And nothing, not Vanessa, not betrayal, not fear, could ever take that away again.